So, Mr. John Noller, you used to own a business here in town, and you currently work at Apple Market. Is that correct?
Correct. That is public info. You can definitely find that out.
So, when it comes to the business you used to own, it was called Syndicate Games.
Correct.
And it was a business that specialized in board games, specifically ones that were more indie related, or was it something that was more of the widespread mainstream stuff? Talk to me about that.
So, the store itself specialized in your RPGs, Warhammer 40k, a lot of like tabletop games. More specialized into that now. Board games always welcome. I loved board games. Multiple people would be like, "Hey, have you played this before?" I'm like, "Nah, please let me at least try it out once. I would love to." General hobby stores, what I would officially classify it as.
And it was kind of a place where, like, I know you guys sold Warhammer, Magic. I'd come and buy Yu-Gi-Oh cards, even though that wasn't, like, it's not the most popular thing in this area, but Magic and Warhammer for sure. But you guys would also, like you were saying, you'd take in, if somebody brought an indie game that they were super interested in, you had all kinds of tables set up for people to just come and play whenever, stuff like that.
Yeah. Basically, I love the gaming community just in general, especially around here, because around here, we have your old hardcore people and like, this new age fangled stuff, it ain't worth anything. Then you have your new people who are like, this is actually really cool. How do I get into this? And we tried to cater both. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. I loved 100% of it.
We were talking earlier about how y'all's main theme at that store was no screens. Come and hang out with people. Don't really get all hung up on your screens unless you're using it for calculations, you're using it for D&D lore or Pathfinder. You talked to me about, hey man, there are like entire places themed after not being on screens, acting like it's 1999. Is there a philosophy that you hold kind of in particular about, not so much screen time?
So with that, a lot of I'm gonna lovingly call them nerds. If you're offended by that, my apologies, but that is what I'm going to refer to as, your nerds, your geeks, those outcasts of society they're those people who play that D&D type stuff, or hey, they're really into their RPGs, or that guy really likes board games. I'm gonna call you all nerds. I love you all. Now, going on to like the no screens and like the 1990s type thing. For example, there are several bars in the U.S. that have gone into like the nerd aspect of stuff. For example, you have your Harry Potter bars that have just the concoctions that, do the smoke, other things like that. Looks really cool. The people know their Harry Potter lore who go there. I'd love to attend one at some point. I might not be fully into it, but it'd be an experience I'm well looking forward to. And then you have your medieval D&D type bars. For example, one of my friends found one that you can order normally and whatnot, or you can roll a d20 and have the dice choose your drink for you. I just thought that was amazing, because it's a concept where you have choice, but then if you don't know what you want, you can randomize it and call it good. Now going on to the no screens aspect, not that we were heavily against screens and whatnot, because it could be useful, be it advertising for different things, entertainment purposes, etc. But specifically, our goal was to make sure people are focused on the actual game, being a presence with either your friends or the people you're competing with in different games. And of course, modern day nowadays, we do have calculators in our pockets, so go ahead and use them. That, and a lot of the games nowadays will just have apps that'll track everything you need to know. And that's about the maximum, most of the things you'll need for it.
And yeah, like the no screen policy, like as I always saw it, was, it was never a forceful thing. It was never a enforced heavily policy, because of course, exactly, calculators, apps. Like I remember using the Yu-Gi-Oh like points counter system, with the dice roll and the coin flip and all that. Like, and I appreciated that, but like it was the spending so much time on your phone, you're not looking at the people in front of you. You're missing your turn, or you're making other people wait because you're sitting here on Facebook doing stuff like that, which is, I mean, a lot of young folks do that. They just kind of forget where they are. But I don't know. I found that very, what do you call it? It felt like an incentive to stay, because as someone who's like approaching 30 and kind of looking back on phones as like, hey, those are cool, but like not so much, especially pre-COVID, like pre-2020. A lot of people on their phones all the time, and you just couldn't have a conversation with a person in front of you without, a phone up in the face. It was nice to be in a place where not just, through the lens of a game, you were actually able to like connect and hang out with people that were not constantly like that, just because the environment didn't incentivize.
Yep. A good driving factor of that was I wanted to have everyone kind of connect to each other, just on a kind of an off-screen type of going on. Actually, like, back in the day when you would hang out with people and all you're doing is you're just hanging around playing a card game. Not that, video games are bad or anything. I spend hours on video games. Love it. Love people I play with on them too. But I do enjoy, just a nice game of Magic the Gathering or some D&D, any RPG for that matter.
Did you start on video games first, or did you start out on card games, board games first?
Let's see. Now you're talking like store-wise, or are you talking like...
No, so I'm talking about you personally.
Me in general?
Yeah, you personally.
Oh, I grew up with my sister's old Nintendo 64, and specifically Mario Kart and Mario 64. Two very punishing, unforgivable games.
Oh, yeah.
Super Mario, for that one, taught me how to platform and then not get angry about being unable to platform. And Mario Kart taught me that, you're just sometimes not going to be better than the people you're playing with. Looking at my older cousins there.
Those games, like, I mean, that's back in the realm of Contra and shit like that. Like, those games were so... Even if you weren't trying to attempt a glitch, you failed so many times it was... felt unfair.
Failure's a part of the experience.
Yeah. And that's what I like about single-player games, You kind of get that experience of learning through failure, whereas multiplayer games, you just respawn and keep going. Kind of lose that element. So you went from video games first into board games?
Yep. So that actually, well...
Or tabletop?
To an extent. Now, so I went from video games to board games because every major holiday my family would do, your standard game of Monopoly that would last 4 hours until food was done. And then throughout food. And then whatever we're celebrating. I was banned from being the banker. Turns out you can hide those 500s underneath the game board pretty easily.
Embezzlement.
I mean, now it's called embezzlement as I'm an adult, but yes, that is correct.
Back then, there was no word.
Back then, I didn't know better. I was 7. But went from that on to your actual, like, full nerd D&D, Magic the Gathering, Warhammer, all of that. Probably, I want to say that was 7th grade. It would have been 7th grade.
What was the thing that kind of made you open up that store? I mean, you were already working like before that?
I had been thinking of, opening a store like that for quite a while. And so several other people I had hung out with, played games with for forever at that point. And one day we just decided, why don't we actually just do this and we'll see what happens. That's kind of how that decision was made, is let's just see what happens.
I remember you guys saying that you made the business plan for all that kind of thing in about like a
Oh, you're talking about the plan for the start?
yeah.
Yeah, that was a wonderful. It went from we have 6 months to kind of plan out, finding a spot, opening up, each of us putting a portion in for buying stock and whatnot, to hey, they got a location. They want to know if we want it in about a week and a half. If not, they're going to move on. And I'm like, well, it's a little early, but let's just go for it. So we did. And instead of 6 months, we opened up in 2 months. Give or take a little. Probably take a little, actually, now that I'm actually thinking about it. But it was pretty fast. Plans moved a lot faster. Overall, I loved the experience.
And the whole time that you were working at Syndicate Games, you were also working at Apple Market, right?
Yep, correct.
And what do you do over at Apple Market?
To put it plainly, I cut steaks. That's essentially what I do. But I mean, there's more to that. But I'm a journeyman meat cutter. I work up there. I like to jokingly tell my friends I've touched every single steak in that store. Which is both true and not. I mean, it's part of my job. I do have to. I wear gloves, don't worry. Also voted best customer service, just saying.
How long in general have you lived in Kearney?
I have been in Kearney my entire life. We're approaching, I want to say 32. One of my cousins, don't quote me on that.
Is there a particular type of business you think you want to try to open in the future?
As I put it, to put it in good perspective, I've kind of completed all my goals. Now, opening business, very stressful. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of time crunches to make. A lot of, financial decisions to make. I'm kind of okay not doing that again. Now, let's say, for example, someone comes in and they're like, hey, I want to do what you guys have done and I want to start one. I'm happy to always try and give my opinion on it. I may not help you fully with it, like, financially or, work there or something like that. Mostly because I do have my Apple Market job and that takes up a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And as lovingly as I can say this, I'm tired of working 16-hour days. They got long. Honestly worth it, though. It was quite fun. A good experience.
So, how long have you worked at Apple Market relative to how long have you lived here? So you said you're 32, you've been here your whole life. In that time, how long have you worked at Apple Market?
I was hired, I want to say 2018. So 6 years? I want to say 6 years. We'll say 6 years and call it good.
Where were you working before that?
Let's see. Before that was... what was it? I think it was Raising Cane's, if I recall. Good people. Loved all of that. I've honestly never had a terrible work experience with anyone that I'm immediately aware of.
And in that time, have you seen Kearney grow at all?
In the 30-some years of my existence here? Yes, I have. So, for example, do you know Glenwood Corners out north?
I think so.
It's a gas station.
Okay.
The roundabout there?
Yeah.
I remember when that wasn't a roundabout. That was the highway went straight, north and south. And the opposite way, that was a stop sign. I remember high school, I would wait a while to cross that road because the traffic just kept coming and coming. Now it's a roundabout. I remember everyone who lived out there was 100% against why would they ever put a roundabout here. And now it's, man, I am so happy for this roundabout because it has made traffic flow there just a little better. And it's a roundabout. I know they're kind of scary, especially in, your smaller towns. But I think it was a good decision to put that there. And then on that, the expansions north of town. I say expansions like they just happened. I remember when Menards came to town, That was the talk of the town at the time.
When was that?
Oh man, that was, I want to say, a little before I think it was in high school at the time. And I know I was in high school because I was able to drive, and my dad was so excited for us to drive there on the opening of it. So he could go shop at, a close Menards and not one some far away. Mm-hmm. Now that said, I remember when Hy-Vee, that was just a field. Now that one's a relatively newer one. A lot of people are going to remember that one. But all the houses north of town, past Glenwood Corners, and like further couple miles, all those nice new ones, I remember when all of that was just an open field. And they put up one house, I'm like, man, that kind of looks weird there. No offense if you own that house. It's a beautiful house. I do envy it a little bit. But it looked a little weird just out there by itself. Mm-hmm. And then throughout the years, they kept popping up more and more. And I'm like, oh, they're like developing the entire area. It looks a lot better now. Not that it looked terrible before, but it looks a lot better now.
What other ways has Kearney changed in the time that you've been here in terms of like before COVID, after COVID?
Honestly, for me, COVID was just a whirlwind because I had what many have called an essential job. I had to be at work. I needed to cut meat. I needed to help feed the people who came in. Now, that said, I don't think through COVID we had like a large decrease in the shoppers. I mean, we had less shoppers, but they were buying more, if you get what I'm trying to say there. Instead of like buying stuff daily, they come and buy their stuff for the week.
Kind of more in bulk.
Yeah, more in bulk. My hours didn't change at all for that. We just kept on trucking through it. Now that said, I did get COVID during COVID, which we had policies in place where, hey, if you know you're likely to have it, we need you tested. Mm-hmm. Please stay home. Mm-hmm. Your coworkers will deal with what happens, at least in our department. We all knew it was coming. We all knew it was going to happen there. Eventually, one of us is going to go home sick or something.
It was a matter of time.
It was just a matter of time, just for the sheer amount of interactions we have daily with customers. As I said, taking precautions, because with love, we work with a lot of elderly, and those specifically, like, we would have our conversations would be a good distance apart, unless they were hard of hearing, and then our conversations were just louder. Yeah. But there was a great amount of care taken by us, at least. Mm. Now, for the town in general, things did slow down. I noticed, not a lot of people out, hanging out on the streets, doing stuff. A lot of people at home. And then I suppose, after COVID, kind of honestly, aside from like shopping and, your major events and whatnot, kind of stayed the same. Not a lot of people going out. A lot of people, I think, got used to that let's just stay at home life going on, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to go home occasionally and just do nothing.
Yeah, I found that kind of interesting. Is not all of it, but some of the nightlife disappeared after COVID. Like, 4 years on, we're at now, is people just kind of stopped showing up to stuff as much as they used to. Maybe it's also just because the college crowd, who's now like 18 and of age and all that, they grew up or rather they came of age, graduated high school at a time when most people were inside. So it's like they're not used to the, I mean, I don't necessarily like the clubbing scene, but the concert scene, the venue scene, the bar scene, that just vanished. Do you see a lot of that coming back now?
So we go back to, the people who, let's say, they've just turned 21, and, going to the bars and whatnot. I see a lot more of those people now because I've been to a couple, happy 21st birthdays, recently that have been out in the bars versus like during COVID, the ones I've gone to. Which brings me up to how many people I actually do know, and it astounds me sometimes, but conversation for another time on that one. During COVID, they're like, oh, I'm just going to stay home and celebrate here and call it good. Now, that said, Kearney being a college town, I'm sure a lot of it is kind of a seasonal type of thing. With college starting, a lot of people coming in, maybe from out of town, sometimes out of country. Just go around, check out the town, see what's up. I see a lot of that during the fall normally, and then winter when everyone decides, hey, it's silly cold outside. Let's go back inside for a moment. It's at those times I think it might get a little slower, but if people find a place they really enjoy, I've seen people out in the middle of blizzards, last year even, going to places where they're like, oh yeah, I'll be here for a couple hours at least. I'm like, cool, I really hope you don't get snowed in. But I do see a revival of it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. And by the nature of it being a transient town, there's people who come in, they have a great time, but then within 2, 3, 4 years, they leave. And then there's a new crop of people who have no idea what's going on. Like, other than the folks who live here, it's just when it comes to, like, most of the people who, like, go to the bars, go to the shows, a lot of them are college kids. But, again, they're only here for 2, 3, 4 years. And then once that 4-year mark hits, you basically have to, like, kind of re-educate a new group of people or show them again what's going on. And
Yep, and Kearney does a pretty decent job at showing, like, the newer college students, hey, this is what is in Kearney. For example, a lot of people at UNK or even, like, the community college, which, well, maybe not so now that they've moved their campus just slightly. But especially the UNK students, we have several who will walk down to the grocery store, pick up their stuff, and then walk back. Because some of them, they don't own cars, and it's within walking distance for them, so that's always fun to see, because I know they go to UNK because all of them are wearing the UNK outfit.
Yeah. Gold and blue in some way.
Yep. Now, on them graduating, a thing I like to positive thinking always is perhaps they'll go back to their hometown, tell them, hey, I had a wonderful experience in Kearney. Maybe you can consider at least visiting it to, let's say they know their younger brother or sister is, trying to attend a college somewhere, or perhaps they want to move out for a while. I think Kearney's probably a good place to. It's not too big, not too small, just about right.
Yeah, what else have you done? I mean, you're a business owner. You obviously live in the world of imagination whenever you torment your players.
To quote my mom, I love her. She has some great one-liners throughout my life. John, we were worried about you for a moment there when you were little and the amount of imaginary friends you had. Like, your father and I were really considering maybe taking you in. I appreciate that. That means I've always had an active imagination. And I love picturing scenarios that may or may not happen in any aspect of either sci-fi, fantasy, your realism.
I imagine that happens a lot when it comes to, like, world building.
A lot of times, my players, they do keep me on my toes quite often. They're very unpredictable, which is something I should predict. So normally, I have a very loose outline of what the dungeon should be, and at this point, we're just going to wing it and see what happens.
Yeah. You've become more accustomed to...
I'm more
gonna have to
accustomed
rewrite this anyway.
I'm going to have to rewrite it anyway. We're just going to spark note the major points, and the rest we're doing live.
Do you have those players that are just, like, they need that structure?
Some of them yes, some of them no. It really depends on the individual person. And as a person who runs any game, you kind of got to be aware of, hey, this person, oh man, for a good example, I actually had a player, they cannot picture anything in their mind, like they actually can't.
Okay.
So with them specifically, I had to draw everything out, break out the mini map, break out the figures, etc. Describe everything to what it actually is. Maybe leave out the descripting words to kind of tie the picture together, but more of the hard information words.
Yeah. That's interesting because I've met someone who was learning sign language as they were learning English as they were growing up, and they think very geometrically.
Yeah, it's a wonderful concept for me at least, to try and imagine that, because that's something I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Imagining stuff like
Like,
that.
you can picture a scene in your mind, but when you think of a color or a feeling, it doesn't bring, oh, that's very square, that's very octagon, you know?
For me, it's a blend.
Yeah.
For example, when you say the color green, my immediate thought is a picture looking out of our window of our green lawn, overlooking the freshly, because we're in Nebraska, the fresh green cornfield right out front.
And that's like the closest we can get to like this synesthesia of how it's connected in the mind.
Yep, and oh man, I've always, after meeting this individual, have wondered what it would be like if I couldn't picture stuff in my mind. I only know. Well, I don't even know, because that's the problem. I don't know how to even approach that.
Yeah, because even like alphabet is somewhat of a physical structure when you get down to like the sounds and the phonetic sounds and stuff.
Yeah.
In order to kind of wrap this back around into, I guess, real life, how many skills in D&D and like interacting with these situations of on the flyness and expecting the unexpected and all these different personality types blending together in situations, how has that affected your real life? Has that given you an advantage into social situations?
Oh boy. So with that, D&D being mainly, it's a social game. You are playing together to build a narrative of your own creation. Keep in mind, the main thing when you run a game is you are the storyteller, the narrator. You are there to explain what's happening. Do you know what's happening behind the locked doors? Of course you do. Do the players know? Maybe not. Maybe not even you know. The only way to do it is open the door and then roll initiative. What really surprised me, though, I guess tying it into, Kearney itself, there are a lot of nerds in Kearney. I have met a good portion of them. There's a lot of them out there I haven't met yet. Be that good or bad, I have no idea. Everyone's an individual. But, opening the store down there, having that entire process before, after, during, stopped me. Man, there are so many unique individuals in Kearney itself.
Oh, absolutely. People that are like veterans and nerds and like, all these weird mixes of people where like you get to know them through one thing and you find out, oh, we both like Halo or something like that.
Yeah, I remember, when I was first starting out in, being what I call a fledgling nerd, exploring stuff I might like, might not like. My first campaign had two 30-year-old guys, one of them being my brother-in-law, myself, who was, I want to say 15, 16 at the time. I want to say a 52-year-old, and his kid, if I recall, I think his kid was younger than me. And unbeknownst to me, our high school jock, who was the last person I ever expected to walk down the stairs into this game room. And it threw me for a loop, because we both like loosely knew each other. Like, we had a morning your homeroom class together. That's where we kind of knew each other. He knew me as the super nerd. I knew him as this man plays football.
Yeah.
And that's all we knew about each other. But when he walked down the stairs, looks at me, is just, I know you.
So me coming from the city, there's always a bunch of different social groups and stuff like that, and I feel like at least in Austin, there's always a way to get into whatever there is to get into. Out here, there's not a whole lot of that kind of variety, but there's always someone that'll surprise you. You know, you go to the bar, you know, you bump into someone in public, and yeah, you find out weird stuff about people, and it's because like in the city, there's these big gatherings, and like there's always
Something
scene
going on.
Yeah, there's always something going on. There's always a scene.
Always an event you want to attend.
Yeah, like the internet, you can always find that group, and with the internet more so, there's always this, sometimes even international group of whatever that thing is about. There's always a forum. There's always this group of people that share that same interest. In Kearney, that's a lot different. You have to do footwork and find that through word of mouth. And like best example, Paul Honich, he's a musician out here. Great guy, hardworking, salt of the earth dude.
I love you.
Yeah, great dude. But I was in the middle of work one day, and my roommate that works with him at Yondis came up to me and said, "Yo, he plays Dark Souls 3." And I'm just like, what?
Okay, you telling me that man plays Dark Souls 3?
That man plays Dark Souls 3. And the first thing I thought of was, I gotta buy him a beer and ask him if he's a great sword user or, you know, a dex user. You know, what's his build? What kind of guy are you?
That's fair. Did you find out?
I did. Great sword.
Great sword. All right. Fair enough. Dex build. Anyway. No prejudice. But yeah, I have many conversations, and I get that aspect from my dad about I can make friends with anyone, or at least find something out about him. And what he has told me through life is just skip the small talk and act like you've known this man for your life.
Yeah.
Which has allowed me to make a lot of friends. Some of them have, you know, randomly shown up on a street corner in the middle of some type of event, and then bring his friends from a different state, and suddenly you are perhaps on some type of podcast with them.
Stuff happens.
Stuff happens in weird ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, people in Kearney, you just need to know where to look for people. For example, if you're looking for nerds, maybe a UNK... actually, I stand corrected on this one. UNK football, I know some of you are nerds. I've had conversations with some of you. You will just get to know people, be it even in passing. You're going to find people who think like you.
Mm-hmm. So in short, if you need someone on your Call of Duty esports team, put a flyer outside the locker room. You might get a bite.
You might.
Would you be interested in hosting any like public events when it comes to cons or tabletop tournaments or card tournaments or video game tournaments?
So I actually used to help out with that in high school. There was a thing called Game Fest that would happen. Man, it's been years since that last one happened. But I did run a D&D table for them. I think, I want to say 3 years, give or take a little. Always had a good experience.
And that's just like a public come down.
Oh yeah,
it
was a come down. You know, if you don't know what you're doing, we'll walk you through it. Same with any of the stuff they had put on there. Mm-hmm. It was purely a let's just come down and have a good time. Let's play some games together.
And I feel like the consensus with those kind of people is it's always this, not necessarily gatekeepy, but there is always that, like, guy. But it seems, for the perspective of most people, that D&D players are very, that's a little too much work, or I don't have enough patience to teach all of this to somebody. Whereas, like, you go to a con and it's very, oh, dude, sit down, dude. Like, I'll teach you math, dude. Like, I don't care, dude. We'll be here all night.
So with that, I mean, you do have your, I think you used gatekeeping term there. You do have some people like that. It's important to know that for every gatekeeper, there's a man who has paid the gate toll for you.
Yeah.
And they'll happily, you know, sit down with you, explain, hey, this is how this is going to work. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's true for basically any aspect of life.
Yeah.
you're going to find gatekeepers everywhere.
Do you remember when we had that big flood?
Ah, the flood. So a fun thing about the flood. Let's go back a couple years before the flood. Do you remember the ice storm that Kearney had? Were you here for that one?
Yes.
All right. We're going to start with that one because that builds up to the flood. So back in the day, I think it was probably high school or so, Kearney was hit with a major ice storm. And we're talking like the storm came in and then circled the town for a couple days, ice storm. And personally, I knew it was bad in town because we lost power. I live out in the country, in the middle of nowhere. If I lost power, that's... part of the town's probably lost power at that point because we're on the same power grid, essentially, for that section. And I have a very fond memory of the electricity going out, and immediately I knew I had to go outside and take a hammer and knock the ice off of everything I could find to bring inside to melt to flush our toilets.
Yeah.
Now, we actually lucked out on that ice storm because aside from the power being out, we heated our house with a wood-burning stove. We were well prepared for winter at that point.
Clutch.
My dad hooked up an old generator so we could hook it up to a TV. I honestly don't know how that one worked exactly because thinking back at it and looking at like the wires, they did not add up to what should have powered each other. Don't know what my dad did. Do not tell my electrician uncle.
He made it work.
He made it work. But at that point, the ice got so bad, my parents couldn't get to work. I couldn't get to school. My cousins couldn't get to work. There's a lot of people around me who were related to me, just so everyone knows. At one point, we had 15 people related to me living within a mile, which is fine. I love them all. Great neighbors, every single one of them.
To be clear, not in the same house.
Not in the same house, no. Separate housing units, same area. Now, flashing forward to the flash flood, that one specifically didn't really hurt our family or our immediate like country area, aside from one road which is just notorious for it flooding anyway during like normal rain. So that was just, it took a couple more days for that to go away.
To be expected.
Roughly 2 weeks, give or take a little. Nothing that like inhibited us from traveling into town. Now, in town, much different. I don't know if all of you were here specifically during that. But
I saw pictures. I wasn't here though.
Yeah, it was a trip.
I saw helicopter pictures of like downtown.
Seeing like half the downtown area and everything on that side of town, it was just water. Now I know it's been said to me if that happened anywhere else, there'd be like a lot of looting going on, and like general stuff along that line. Versus here, where it's like, oh, it flooded. Hey, if you got nowhere to stay, please come over. Like, our house is dry. Or, hey, if your house is ruined and you got no food in there, come on over. We still got some, at least. And my personal favorite, let's hook up the inner tube and just float down the street. Yeah. I do not recommend, I do not endorse doing such actions. But man, you looked like you had a great time.
One thing that I find that Central Texans and Nebraskans have in common is they love drinking beer and floating down the river and just chillaxing on a hot day.
Even if it's Main Street.
Even if it's Main Street, yeah.
Now, that said, with the actual flood itself, we do know a lot of people who it did actually affect. For example, for those who don't know, it got really cold during the flood as well. Like, the nights got super chilly. One of my niece's friends up north of town, which was also a little flooded. Her car got stuck in the water, and then the water pushed it over into the ditch. And she was actually stranded in, I think, a grove of trees or field. It was either a field or grove of trees. And they actually had to get, I think it was the firemen who had to come out and try and get her away from that.
Damn.
And if I recall, she did get hypothermia. She lived, thankfully, but could have been a lot worse for a lot of people around here.
Oh, yeah.
Now that said, we are a very resilient community. We do bounce back pretty fast from such events.
Mm-hmm. You said something about thawing ice from outside to flush the toilets.
Yep.
I remember...
That's a core memory.
See, that reminded me of Texas heat waves on the opposite side of that, where we would have to fill up our bathtubs because the city told us they were going to shut the water off. So we would have some sort of excess non-potable water to wash dishes, wash our clothes, wash ourselves, flush the toilet.
Yeah, we kind of lucked out with that one as well. We got the aquifer, just here.
We got an aquifer too, but if you run your sprinkler in the middle of the day, like in the hottest point of the day, you're getting a ticket. Like, there's no reason. That's going to evaporate as soon as it hits the ground.
Fair enough. You ever get jealous of the people who have the little tractor sprinklers? Have you seen those? They're normally yellow, have white tires. They got...
Yeah, and they roll around.
Yeah, and they just roll around.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one in action. 90% of them that I have seen are rusted and old and like next to someone's house with like a bush growing around it.
All I'm saying is I
know what you're talking about, but
every
I've never
person
seen one in action.
I have seen, their house is either like decently well kept and they're like maybe 60s. I've never seen someone our age being a very loose term considering I am a little older than you, which is fine. Yeah, youngin. I've never seen someone our age own one of those.
Yeah.
And that is one of my goals in life, is to find out where these people are buying these. Because I've seen them brand new, on the lawn. I'm like, where?
Tractor Supply Company? I've seen... Anywhere you would get, like, lawn stuff. Like, I think Menards might have one. I don't know.
I mean, anywhere I get lawn stuff is out of the well house out back.
One thing I have seen when it comes to, like, fancier technology, along my bike rides to work, I'll find the normal occasional squirrels and rabbits and cats and dogs. But there's a robotic lawn trimmer that...
You've seen it too.
Yeah, and it just, I've like turned the corner, it's like coming up at me, and it's like about to come to the sidewalk, and it makes a U-turn and goes around the other way, and I'm
All
just
I'm
like,
saying
oh, hello
is,
there.
Release the Rumbas got a lot more terrifying the moment I saw one of those.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, this is a real thing that could be made.
UNK has a few of them I've seen on their campus that they trimmed the football field and some of their other bigger fields.
Man,
that don't have buildings on
I'd go
them.
just watch that.
Yeah. I'm sure
That'd
you
be
can find a
oddly
live
therapeutic.
stream of like a GoPro strapped to one of those things.
Oh,
They have those with cats. Have you ever seen like the cat videos of?
I have.
They got a camera
I have
strapped to
quite.
them, and it's just like what they do throughout the day. But yeah, I see that little robot yard trimmer, and I just greet it like I would any other animal that I find on my way to work. Just, hey, how's it going? Short of petting it.
So, did I ever tell you... So, there's a eagle's nest. I hope it's still there. But there's one down south over that bridge.
I think we've talked about it a couple times.
What I found out last year is there is a eagle that actually flies around our area on the opposite side. And I love our American, symbol of freedom there. Love the national bird. Beautiful animal. I really need it not to stand in the middle of the road when I'm coming home late at night.
Is it a bald eagle?
It is a bald eagle that
no.
I've lovingly named him Harry. I do not know if it's a male or female. That's just what happened when I'm sitting there waiting for him to move because that's our national symbol.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
I'm just letting it be.
Yeah. You have two options. You can sit and wait, or you can go in the ditch.
It's there eating whatever, it's just hunted. I'm not going to disturb it. But man, wanted to go home and sleep.
Yeah.
But I said, Harry, please fly, do something.
I've had a kind of relationship like that where there's back in my hometown, there's this white hawk. There's a handful of hawks that live out there because there's a few cotton fields and stuff, and they go after the mice out there. But there's one white hawk specifically that lived in the forest around the creek that was by the new hospital, which is now not new at all. But it's just one of those things that you drive by and you see it and you're like, oh, I got to see him today. He's out there.
We have a couple of hawks out at our place, and I love seeing them fly around because A, they can take care of rabbits. We have a lot of rabbits. I have a very love-hate relationship with rabbits out in the country. Love the animal. They will chew through your car wires.
Even owls too. I've seen some owls out here and in Texas, but it's just so rare.
Yep. So a lot of Kearney has the forested areas outside of towns and whatnot. There are a couple owls out there, from what I remember at least. I know there is one out, at least out by our place, who kind of hangs out. I don't think he actively has a nest there. I think it's more of he flies there for hunting reasons and whatnot. But there's actually a good amount of wildlife around here.
Oh yeah, I've seen hogs, not as much as I've seen in Texas, but I've seen turkeys, wild turkeys.
Have you seen the turkeys in town?
Not in town, no.
Okay.
I feel like I've heard a couple in town, but I've never seen them.
Okay, you're not going insane. There's a group of wild turkeys that's in town.
Wild turkeys in the middle of town.
Yep. They go down toward. Last time I saw them, they go down towards Harmon, and they hang out in one of the neighborhoods around there.
That makes sense. Someone's probably feeding them corn or something.
But in high school, my route home, well, not home, route to my mom's work, took me right by where they would hang out. And there were just several times I've seen a line of cars just waiting for these turkeys to cross the road. I'm like, cool, I'm going to join them because I'm a pedestrian.
I love that. Peacocks. That's another thing, because it's so weird how many similarities I have between rural Texas and where I live now. Wild peacocks, or not necessarily wild, but like pets, that just get out and become... I wouldn't call peacocks feral, but just more attuned to the wilderness.
They're there now.
They don't rely on humans.
Yep, they're... At least when I was growing up, there used to be a couple who actually lived quite close to us who occasionally had some of them just wandering about. And you do have, I think, probably the generation before me, they're like, oh yeah, people used to have those around here occasionally. Just kind of interesting to think back on, having just one of those around.
Yeah.
What really threw me off was there was a guy who I think farmed ostriches, if I recall. That one was weird growing up because we drove by this guy's house and just fenced in his backyard. Or at the time I thought it was backyard. Turns out it was more of a pen type thing. Just
For
over the fence came the head of an
dinosaurs.
ostrich, and I'm like, what is this?
Theropod dinosaur.
What animal is this?
Yeah, we have emu farms. We have a lot of emu farms in Texas, which is weird. For some reason, it just makes money. Yeah.
Whatever works.
Yeah. You live definitely a lot farther from the town. Do you get a lot of coyotes or foxes? I know the time I've spent in Illinois, I've seen beavers and otters and stuff like that around the rivers.
So with that, the land we live on, there is a good old farm pond out back. You can't see it from the road, but it is there.
Yeah.
So
I still need to take my fishing pole out
actually, yeah, turns out there are fish in there. By the way, we did check that one.
Hell yeah.
For those of you wondering, green sunfish, and I think, let's see, green sunfish, bluegill, and I think we identified the last one as a bass. Don't quote me on that one.
Okay. Think anything else is hiding in there?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of things hiding in there. It's a pond. It's a farm pond. Could be anything in there.
But like, as far as fish species,
There might be catfish down there. There also might be bullheads. Which, if you haven't caught a bullhead, please do. They are just the cutest little things. I love them so much. You've gotten me on a tangent.
that's fine.
Adorable
What is a
things.
bullhead? Because I come from Texas. Where
Gotcha. So a bullhead,
It's nothing
it's
but perch and
in the
catfish.
catfish family.
Okay.
I don't know what they would call them down there. But they're akin to a catfish.
But smaller.
They're a little smaller. Man, I love them. They're just I personally think they're adorable. They're the fish I grew up like catching actively, mostly because we could fish out back, and I didn't need a license
Yeah.
to fish on, our family's land.
Yeah.
Yeah, there could be a lot of things in there. There are a lot of frogs.
Okay.
I know that for sure.
Any crawfish?
That one's debatable. There
Crawfish
may
are
or may
good
not
eating.
be.
See, here's my plan. Dig up another hole on your property. No fish. Maybe a catfish. Just to, like, get the ecosystem going. Get that thing full of crawfish. Have a crawfish boil.
Now, that said, there might be freshwater clams in there.
You said something about that.
I did, back in high school, I released a good amount of them in there. For those of you who are environmentalists, I did a lot of research on it. They were fine in there.
I know you have a problem with zebra mussels out here too, and like other invasive species and stuff, but there are local species freshwater mollusks.
I believe so. Now, bear with me, as this was in high school, which is a hot moment ago. I mean, like any natural ecosystem, we do have our variants here as well. I think for example, there's a fish called a buffalo head.
Really?
Yep. See, it's not a smallmouth buffalo head. I'm gonna have to relook at that. My friend up in Shadron is probably going to throttle me at some point because I know he'll know this off the top of his head. But there are actually a lot of fish species that are super cool. I mean, if you're looking for bluegill sunfish, they're all over.
Is there anything that's native Nebraska only?
So, using the knowledge I had from back just in high school in general, there was a minnow. I forget the exact name of it, but it's got, I think, a red little stripe on the side of it. Super tiny. But it is natively found in Nebraska rivers.
Go Huskers.
Yeah. And I had the opportunity on one of our family vacations. The people we were visiting happened to live next to a river. And I got to go out there, and it was super isolated, super cool. We actually found, out of like the 50 minnows, we kind of just, caught to, let's look through them, see what we got, whatnot. I found, I think, one. And I was so excited that I had found this specific minnow. And then we released them back because, we're on vacation. We're not going to do anything.
Yeah. That's cool. You have a whole state local fish that is basically wearing a Huskers jersey. How does that work out?
Sometimes it just happens the way it should.
Have you ever seen the cranes? I know that's a big deal for wildlife and the people around here.
So the cranes. Now, keep in mind, I'm native to Kearney. This happens every year. For me, it's
You see people come and go.
I see people come go. For me, it's the cranes are in town.
Mm-hmm.
Neato. Occasionally, once every couple years or so, because again, for me, not a huge major event. It is a major event, but I've
You
become
see it all the
associated
time.
with
Yeah.
it every year.
It's the Nebraska Aurora Borealis. It happens every
Yeah.
year.
So I've been out there a couple times. I do enjoy it. Go out, see the cranes, bring some binoculars, take a look at them and whatnot. And then I do know a couple out of town bird watchers who they're like please contact us the moment this starts. And I'm like, oh yeah, you guys are really into cranes. And I do happily let them know every year, hey, the tourists have started coming, please, come visit and, maybe take me crane watching. We'll find out what happens there.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, that's probably one of our very prideful points is we have a great crane watching area.
Oh yeah.
Up by the Platte and whatnot.
No hills.
I mean, we're flatlanders, so yes.
Yeah. That's one weird thing is you don't have... You do have elevation change. Like, I'm not going to say you don't. But it's so subtle and it's so...
It's very gentle until you reach the sandhills.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, you're from Nebraska, you're a flatlander. Well, I mean, yes, I am a flatlander. However, there are still some good sights to see that are not
definitely.
flat.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the whole state has just a unique vibe all around.
Oh, yeah. One thing I will point out, though, your rivers are flat. They're not
the
deep.
way they should be.
I have a fear of rivers specifically that I just will never get in Nebraska because there was one river specifically in Texas that the edge of the water was just so steep and it just went down so deep.
They talk about the river that's kind of like flipped on its side.
I don't know if we're talking about the same
that,
river. It was just some river I went to.
Look like that, gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
When I was a kid, yeah, and there's a lot of rivers in Texas, and a lot of them are very narrow and deep, whereas y'all's are. It just depends on.
We can go stand out there.
Yeah, you can go stand out there, whether it's nipple high or ankle high. That's about as much as it's going to get, depending on the season and how much water's.
A lot of people will, take an inner tube, float down them, get their friend to pick them up several miles out.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of like really cool sand islands in the rivers and stuff, just because it's so shallow. Cool. Yeah. Rarely do we ever get that in Texas. There's sometimes where like the river branches and then comes back, but it's not that just,
What's really cool is anytime I go out there, the little sandbanks, the little islands in the actual Platte itself, they shift. It's super cool to watch.
Oh, yeah. That's nuts. I would love to see a time lapse of that and just watching the sand, like dunes, kind of like turn into waves and like wash down.
Really cool, actually.
Is there a delta where all that sand washes up?
Bear with me, as a lot of our stuff either doesn't move or does move. Which is... I mean, that's it. Man, I wish there was a better description for that, but it either goes somewhere or doesn't. I'm at the edge of my seat. I think a lot of it... I want to say a lot of it stays, because I don't see anything getting deeper.
Yeah.
I think it just moves.
Do you think it's consistently like coming from Iowa and like going to like Washington, I think is where the Platte ends up?
Now, see, the Nebraskan me will definitely say Iowa can keep their dirt.
As soon as it crosses the border, it's Nebraskan.
It's Nebraskan. That's just one of those things I don't have a clear answer on. The best thing I can say is it might, which is a good outlook on life.
Does the Platte have good fishing? Because it's
yes
very
and no.
shallow.
There are some good fishing spots that, the old timers will tell you, oh yeah, fish here, you'll get everything. And there are other times where, you're fishing just on the Platte and nothing.
I feel like the lakes are the only places like really deep enough to have what you would call a fishing spot.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Have you been out to Fort Kearney?
A couple times.
Gotcha.
Not for very long. We haven't spent the night there yet. We need to.
It's a good time. Especially, let's see, roughly 11 o'clock at night singing Journey in the men's showers. Just saying, it's an experience.
You've told me that one. So, Fort Kearney specifically, I noticed they have like this lake with a ring around it. That's a road, and then you can park. Is there like any hiking?
Bear with me, as it's been a moment since I've been out there. I will admit that one. Mostly because all the people I went camping with have now, they've moved on, doing other things, or get transferred to Shadron, get a better job, meet a woman, get a wife, have a kid, occasionally show up saying, "Hey man, what you doing? You want to help me move a car? Don't tell my wife." Best gift ever for his wife, by the way. But yeah, I actually don't know on that one, because anytime I've been out there, I've only been out there to like spend the night at one of the camp spots and maybe do some fishing.
They do fishing in that lake that's right there?
There's a lot of those little lakes out there that you can definitely do a fishing.
I imagine the main one that all the cars are around, like a lot of the fish don't bite right there, just because.
I haven't officially tried that one. I've heard. So back in the day, it used to be the third lake on the left was the best fishing spot.
Okay.
Has that changed? I actually don't know. I should probably go back and find out.
They're not connected in any way, right? Unless it floods?
They are not connected. At least as far as I am aware, they are not connected. What happens is they will stock them every year, give or take.
Okay.
There's actually a thing the game and parks do pretty well along all Nebraska. Is they do stock a lot of the ponds out here.
Does that come from local fish breeding grounds that they have, or is there a lake out there that's like a national park or some federal land?
That is actually a very good question. I might have to look further into that one.
Yeah, because I'm super interested in this stuff.
Because that's actually something I've never.
Because they come from somewhere,
actually
and they're local species, right?
A lot of them are local species.
Yeah.
Or at least some of them are now.
Yeah.
They won't have a huge impact on, the local.
Obviously, they're not going to
ecosystem
bring an
that
invasive
area.
species, but stuff that's local to at least this part of
The region.
The
at least.
region, yeah.
Stuff they know that it's going to be fished out.
Yeah. As an Eagle Scout, I had the option to be a game and parks or whatever, and all that stuff is super interesting, but I've never put any of the effort into it other than getting a boating or fishing license.
I hear that. Yeah. Oh man, even back in the day when my friend and I were, competing to see who could get the largest fish, I don't think we ever actually, because we knew they restock them and whatnot.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever actually thought about where that does come from. Now, I'm sure there's probably a fishery somewhere.
Yeah.
Either in Nebraska or very close to it that they do come from.
Because I've had the same thought about seafood local.
The local seafood?
Yeah. And you're on the food market, so
I've been
let
the
me
food
hear some of
market
that.
So the seafood in Nebraska, you're going to have a lot of people tell you it's not as good as the west or east coast. And I mean, honestly, freshly caught mahi-mahi, that was one of the best things I have ever tasted in my life. Are you going to get fresh mahi-mahi here? Not freshly caught, no. A lot of your stuff around here, if it's not fished locally, it is going to be your either transported via truck from a good distance, which I mean with modern technology is not an issue at all.
Yeah,
it's still going to taste all right. It's still going to be good.
I just come from Joe's Crab Shack in Houston.
I
right on the
kill
coast
for a Joe's Crab Shack.
But here's the thing: I don't know if they bring. If they ship food in, I have no idea as a customer.
Gotcha.
But to be right there on the coast and look at a crab and go, "You're next,"
Fair enough.
That fresh.
So with that, a lot of it is through your wonderful trucking companies, who they'll travel. For example, I do know one man who does He delivers fish. That's what he does for his job.
And you would do that live, right? The best way to keep it fresh is to keep it
fresh
alive.
is keep it alive.
Yeah.
Now that said,
and in good condition, treat it well.
Treated well. Now that said, there's a process called the flash freezing, which I know That one.
As someone in the food business, gross. As an animal lover and an animal caretaker, why? Just keep it alive. It'll taste better if you kill it in the grill.
Yes, but with modern market and especially Nebraska being a landlocked area,
Yeah.
these are some of the best options we have is frozen or, trucked
Transported
in.
alive, yeah. That's nuts. I wonder how they store, like, a shipping container truck. Because there would be sloshing around, right?
Not if they're,
To the brim.
not exactly. a lot of your transports nowadays are going to be the flash frozen or semi frozen, kept extremely cold types.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot when it comes to, like, sci-fi movies and stuff, when it comes to, like, future food, like the dehydrated pills and stuff like that, and, like, at least in the cartoons, you would, like, drop a drop of water on it, and it would turn into, like, a turkey 3-square meal with stuffing and all this other stuff. But, yeah, the whole freeze-drying and that, like, it's... I don't want to say it immediately tastes bad, but it's not going to taste as good as a freshly breathing, bleeding animal on your plate. Like, if you go to a Japanese sashimi grill or something, it's very different from this landlocked. Because that was one of the first things I asked when we were at the supermarket. I was like, yo, crawfish, crabs, lobster... Some of it's still here, at least seasonally. Where does it come from? Who grows it? Is it a lake that someone dumped a bunch of sea salt into and made it an ocean environment so I could have crab legs?
Why, my friend, those come from water. You'll find that occasionally.
Nebraska has a lot of water, but not
the water you're looking for.
Not the
for
water
those
you're
specific-
looking for, yeah.
They are probably... for example, there are some companies they'll actually fly in their stuff to try and get it as fresh as possible. Now, keep in mind, it'll still be like your processed, flash frozen, chilled heavily, etc. But they'll fly it in and then they'll pick it up from the actual airport and then ship it out.
I wonder if there's enough of a customer base in Central America for... like an aquarium kind of deal where there's like a sort of like an indoor grow where like it's a
Kind of like a fish and eat.
Yeah, or like here's a source for shipped live fresh seafood or whatever, but it's like this contained environment. You're not digging crawfish out of the mud.
That's the best part.
Well, yeah. Gives it the flavor.
I mean, it does. I can see a market for it. Now, would it be, a market that people would want to tap into? Is a different entire
Would it
question.
be sustainable enough?
Would it be sustainable enough to actually maintain?
Remember when Walmart used to have lobsters?
I do. I remember that vividly.
See, I haven't gone to Walmart a lot recently, and in my mind, they're still there.
It's been years, my brother.
Oh my god. Because Hy-Vee still has lobster, right? They still have a tank with a few lobsters?
Not that I'm aware of.
No? Oh my gosh.
Hey, remember when Walmart sold fish?
Yeah, they had an aquarium. Back
You know how long
you would
ago
walk
that
in,
was?
and it was on the far right, on the front side.
Far right, I'm talking far left.
Well, maybe some of the stores were mirrored. In
Southern-
my store in Texas,
Southern
they were on the
Texans.
far right, like heathens, I guess. But, they sold goldfish and beta and, yeah. I remember that. We used to be a real country.
It used to be a one-stop shop, but now it's everything but fish. But fishing supplies, I will take that actually.
Yeah, they have food and I think they have like salt and some small tanks and decor.
I don't know. They switched the layout of so many stores nowadays. I'm confused as I walk into them.
HEB Plus, even before I moved, they switched their layout so many times. At least the big one that was in my town.
I've heard rumors of that place. What a land.
H-E-B and Buc-ee's is one thing I miss, but I can live without. I feel it's one of those things, like the city boy side of me is like, yeah, man, I'm roughing it out in the wilderness. All we got is a Walmart and a Target.
My son, you live in town.
But no, the Boy Scout in me is just like, yeah, there's enough here around. Like, we don't have a Popeyes, but big whoop. We need a Best Buy. So yeah, that was a very long tangent. Are you thinking about doing any public events for like video games or nerds or just?
I mean, I'm not, but I can always be talked into a lot of things. I mean, a good example of that is, hey man, we're doing a podcast, you in? I got nothing. Let's do it.
Tasia, you weren't in the room when I mentioned this, but he's gonna DM and we're going to record a Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
It's an idea that was thrown about, and again, I can be talked into a lot of things.
Even if it's a regular night, either upstairs or in the pit. I'm okay with background noise because, you know, the party will go into a tavern and, hey, Lee's here. Hey.
Yep. I'm here for it. That I am down for it. 'Cause, yeah, I would love to play D&D with John, and also incorporating the other side would be incredible.
I'm constantly reminded I am surrounded by nerds.
All right. It is officially spooky time. John Noller, have you had any spooky or paranormal or wacky, tinfoil, out of the ordinary, peculiar, not your everyday experiences?
Do you really want to know?
So here's some background for that question. I am a skeptic, but I'm a skeptic that will throw myself into the Mariana Trench to figure out and find out whether or not, yes or no. I absolutely believe, but I believe in the sense of I really want it to exist. I've never experienced it. I'll never defend it in an intellectual argument because I've never experienced it. I can never say whether or not it's real or not, but I really want to believe that it exists. Ghosts, UFOs, anything like that. I do believe reality is stranger than what is the surface level. I need that personal experience. I can't defend something I haven't personally seen, so lay it on me.
Fair enough. Are you familiar with the Frank House?
That's on campus, isn't it?
It is on campus.
Is that the real fancy one with all the plants around it?
Yep, that it is. So, for those who don't know, the Frank House has been there since basically the founding of Kearney. The Franks actually helped Kearney out quite a lot.
Okay.
Now it's been changed, like when tuberculosis was a thing. I mean, it still is a thing, but more so back then.
Yeah.
It was actually turned into a hospital to help assist with that. They've done a wonderful job, people who work at the Frank House, to go through the knowledge, the backstory of it. Do maintenance, preserve its historical significance.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the wonderful opportunity back, oh gosh, it's been several years now. I was invited there by a man who was going to work late that night there. He had permission to do this at the time, but it was, it was Halloween, getting towards the spooky season and whatnot. And he had invited us out to what he called the spooky night at the Frank House. His thought was, this is a great opportunity to teach his friends some history about the Frank House and whatnot. So we all said, oh yeah, we'll come out and we'll definitely take part in your wonderful historic little thing you're doing. And so all of us show up that evening, and two of us couldn't make it due to some family stuff going on that they needed to attend, which is understandable. So what he had done is he had taken a description of an item in the house, and it could have been anywhere in the house that basically we were allowed to go. For example, it ranged from like the one I was assigned was I needed to find where a fountain pen was, and it sounds a lot easier than you would think.
Okay.
It's a fountain pen. I found it on a desk, and he turned all the lights off like it was, back when this place would have been functional.
Yeah.
So not a lot of light going on, which really set the ambiance of the spooky season that year. So I found mine relatively fast. He had set a place with about 8 descriptive cards around the table, and he had originally planned for all 8 of us to be assigned one. We find it. He talks about the historical significance of each one, etc.
Okay.
Well, only 6 of us ended up going. My friend and I, we found ours relatively fast. I forget what his was. It was like a brush or something that he found in one of the bathrooms. And the gentleman who was hosting said, well, I got, 2 leftovers. Would you mind doing those? That way, I can give the entire presentation.
Yeah.
And, being good spirits, we're, oh, yeah, of course. I kid you not, I picked up my card, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, man. Because, like, so far in all the descriptions, it's, a fountain pen, a brush, an
Some
old
practical things
you would find in the house and whatnot.
Yeah.
The card I got said sickle. And I'm like, okay.
It's still kind of an everyday use tool.
Back in the
that
day, sickles were very used.
Yeah.
It's a very logical thing that they would have
Yeah.
for the time. So, first off, spooky season, little off-putting, but, back in the day, let's do it. Let's find this thing. So I go about, searching everywhere I could think of, and it's been a good, 20, 30 minutes at this point, and I just can't find this thing. And eventually, one of our other friends had found the other one that was missing and assigned. So he's like, I'll come join you, help you look for this sickle. 2 eyes better than 1. And eventually, we had to get a hint on where this thing could be, because we had, searched what we thought was mostly the entire house.
And this is a 2-story.
If I recall, I want to say it's a 2-story building
With a
give or take,
basement?
with a basement.
Yeah.
Now keep that basement in mind, because the hint was, hey, you're gonna find it in the basement.
I've been to this place. I've been outside of it and on
Yep,
the front
it's a beautiful
porch.
building.
Oh yeah, but I'm imagining it at night.
At night,
Yeah.
much different. My friend and I were like, okay, it's in the basement. There's no light down there, but we're allowed to use our flashlight phone on our phone, I guess. That way we can actually see what we're looking for. So we go down there, and there's a really cool boiler room.
Boiler rooms are scary. Just in general.
In general, yes.
Yeah.
Now that said, I had known this man for a while, and I helped him occasionally, just randomly hang out. He's like, hey, I'm working at the Frank house. You want to come visit? Learn about some stuff. I'm like, oh, sure, why not? I'll come hang out a while and learn about the history there.
We're gonna need to grab this guy's contact information.
I will definitely try and get that to you. But after a while, my friend and I who were down there, we searched the boiler room. I mean, we're looking really hard for this sickle down there. And we check every room. We check the boiler room about 4 times. We went in there and scoured from floor to ceiling to try and find this. We went, down the hallway. We looked in every single room we could find. And in the there's not a lot in the basement. Legitimately, there's not
From the
a whole lot.
outside, it doesn't seem like a big place.
It feels slightly bigger on the inside.
Yeah.
Which, old houses are kind of designed to
Yeah.
appear larger than what they were built.
With like the indoor balcony.
Yeah. And so we had been searching the basement. Now, keep in mind, it's not a large area, but we had been searching down for a good 40 minutes at this point. And he and I are like, man, we can't find this thing. We've searched every single room. We have looked everywhere we could think that this thing would logically be, and places where it might not logically be as well. And eventually, a third member comes down. He's like, hey guys, what's taking so long? We're like, we can't find the sickle down here. And he's like, oh, well, let me take a look with you guys. And of course he asks, where have you looked? And we just give him a very exasperated, we've looked everywhere we can think. So another 15 minutes goes by. We've rechecked the boiler room. We've rechecked the hallway. We've rechecked everywhere. And eventually we come to the conclusion that, maybe the sickle just isn't down here. Maybe it was moved in a previous, exposition of the building or something. Or, someone found it and said, oh, hey, this doesn't go here, it goes here, or something like that.
Did the guy hide them in, like, relative spots to where they would have been in that time of use, or...?
Yes, essentially. So we've been searching down there a good 45 hours or so. Eventually, the host comes down, and he's just, hey, guys, it's been like an hour, you doing all right? Or all just, we can't find the sickle, man. Like, we have looked the entire basement over several times for the past hour, and we just cannot find it. And he's like, oh, well, here, let me help you. And I kid you not, he bends over and literally just picks up the sickle from the middle of the room.
On the floor?
On the floor, where we had been walking for an hour.
And you, like, walk around
and
close to the wall because you're expecting it to be hung up, or,
Not even that. We had searched the entire basement for this thing, and, like, you're walking with a flashlight on your phone, you keep it down so you don't hit anything as you walk.
Yeah.
That spot was barren the entire time until he came down and picked it up. And at that point, we're going to go upstairs.
Did it seem like he put it down?
See, originally, that's what looking back on it, thinking, maybe he had it in his hand, and he realized he had forgotten to, hide it and whatnot.
Yeah.
The thing was this big.
Yeah. You're not going to miss that.
And he came down with his phone flashlight and just an open hand. Reached down and picked up. And it was just there.
That's some Saw 1 body in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
The whole movie, you're just an unsuspecting. And then at the end of the movie, he gets up and he's just like, game over.
Yeah.
You
but
lose.
The entire time we were down there, logically thinking, you would think one of us would have saw it walking through with our phones, keeping an eye out,
But my
not
thing
a loose
is,
brick
you're
on
looking
there.
on the walls, you're looking on the tabletops, you're looking on the pipes where it could be hanging, not on the floor. You're only looking on the floor to walk.
Here's
but
the
you're
thing,
looking
though.
for the object.
I have a vivid memory of when I first went down there, scoping out the room. And the first thing I always do, because I was always, at the time, superstitious of tripping over something, first thing I do is I
there
look on the
anything
ground.
on the floor for me?
Yeah, like,
to
a
walk
loose,
over,
a loose
yeah.
brick or, a cement block or something
Anything,
like
cord, yeah.
that. And now, the basement, though it's a basement. You're going to expect stuff like that. There was nothing in the room. There was nothing to step over, nothing. It was like a cement floor, basically.
In your mind, as logical and as cold and as scientific as you can get,
I have no
that
explanation
thing materialized.
on how that got there.
Okay.
And to this day, people ask, hey, you want to go check out the Frank house? I'm like, well, yes and no.
Do you think it's that building?
Now, we get into the, one would say the more spiritual part of that. Now with the tuberculosis, all of that, people did die.
You would expect some kind of residual bad feeling.
Yep. Now, if you were a more spiritual person, you would expect that to be there.
Yeah.
Now, I tend to lean more on the logical side of things. For example, my house, it makes strange noises. That's because it's built out of an old barn and cinder blocks fished out of a lake. I expect it to make noises.
The fact that you have that knowledge.
Yeah.
Whereas most people, because I've heard that argument of, just the house is settling. And, most people today, cookie cutter house built out of concrete and plaster and plywood and all that stuff,
And it's also like, I live out in the country. There are definitely mice somewhere in the house.
Yeah.
I know because my cats have caught a couple and brought them to me.
Yeah.
But that particular experience, I have no logical explanation on how three, grown men could walk by this for an hour. Well, one of us for 15 minutes, the others for 45 minutes, actively searching for it, knowing pretty much what a sickle looks like.
Yeah. You've grown up knowing about the threat of communism.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have sickles at home. They're old and rusted and look almost exactly like the one
Weren't they
that was
used
there.
for like hay or something?
Kind of like a threshing action, yes.
Yeah. So here's two questions I have. First of all, you brought up that story first. Was it because it was the most weird?
That is the single one I cannot logically explain because it happened with multiple people.
Just the most abrupt, everybody had eyes on it.
Everyone had eyes on it instantly. This was not here before.
Yeah. Now, my second part of the question is, you mentioned the building specifically
Yeah.
a lot. Like, you kind of emphasized it. And you said you're coming from a more logical, more scientific kind of what is the explanation. There's something must have happened.
Yep.
But you tie it to the location, which is, I guess, in the realm of paranormal activity. That's a very woo-woo.
Yep. Growing up, my dad was a weatherization inspector. So, weird noises in the night from the house. He could be, that's just the vents kicking on. It's an old house. It's going to make a little bit of noise when it does
It's the load-bearing beams.
It's the load-bearing beams.
It's windy outside. They're shifting.
Yep. Now, that said, our house is also incredibly soundproof. Outside weather, I sleep right through it. Don't know what's going on. There could be a tornado outside. I would not know in my room.
You would have to look out the window.
I would have to look out the window and see
Okay.
the flashes of light from outside.
Okay.
So normally I could always assume, it's just an old building. It makes noises like this.
Does your house have a basement? I know it has like a somewhat underground.
So we have it's kind of a half basement. We're built into a hill.
Yeah. So one side's in
One
the
side's
hill,
in the ground.
and
The other
one
side
side's
is kind
exposed.
of exposed.
Yeah.
But yeah. Now, growing up on that side, it's a very logical, this is the explanation of it and whatnot. Now, on the flip side of that, there are things we just cannot logically explain through, it's just the vents kicking on. Or, it's the wind hitting something on the side of them.
Just random noises.
Just random noises that really we can't explain. Which is why I'm a firm believer, get yourself a familiar in your house that knows what's down.
We have neighbors upstairs and downstairs, so anytime there's a random noise, it's almost always chalked up to the cats are f***ing with something or the neighbors are making noise. So we always have that excuse.
Now, going back to get yourself familiar inside your dwelling, wherever it be, mine awkwardly turned out to be a cat. I'm a cat person, everyone knows this. Not that I don't love dogs, I love dogs as well. Lizards, I've never had one, so they're cool.
They can't regulate their own body temperature.
On a list of stuff I can't logically explain, involving my cat, there was one night at my house, I heard just, a weird noise. I'm like, whatever, it's the cats out doing cat stuff out in the living room and whatnot. And I decided, I'm kind of thirsty. I'll go get that midnight glass of water, go back to bed. I go out into my kitchen, flip on the light, and my cat is standing on its hind legs on the back of a kitchen chair, which is, the thickness is probably no more than 1.5 inches in, width, give or take. But she positioned herself so she was staring directly at the wall. And I don't know if anyone's seen a cat just stand on its hind legs.
It's a little weird.
It's weird. The paws are at her side, and she's just standing, looking at the wall. And she's like maybe a foot from it. I flipped on the light, saw that, just flipped it off. I'm like, I'm not that thirsty. I think I'm gonna maybe just go back to bed. And then like 20 seconds later, she jumps in bed and just, no. You're awake, yay! Just cat stuff. It's random, and like at first I thought maybe it was like a bug or something, but nah. that image is burned into my mind.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier about cats are so weird about it because they could see a speck of dust on the wall and think it's a spider and just stare at it for an hour. But like when a dog is staring at an open door, I'm scared of what's on the other side of that door. Because the dog's like job is to alert the pack that something unfamiliar is there. Where a cat's just gonna stare at shit. And if you say something or something moves or makes a noise, it's just gonna look at the origin of sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, going along with that, so Tilda Coon, I lovingly call my guard cat. She does not like anyone downstairs. Be it, a family member coming to say, hey, it's time for breakfast or something like that. She will actively get in a defensive posture and hiss at them to prevent them from coming anywhere in the basement.
She doesn't want people to go in there?
She doesn't want anyone near me.
Okay, okay.
She views me as, that's dad.
Okay.
No one come near him.
Okay.
Or unless they have my wrath.
It's that overprotective.
It's the overprotective guard animal. You're picture a guard dog.
Okay.
Protecting its owner.
At first I thought you were talking like the cat doesn't want anyone to go down in the basement. Because,
I mean, aside from me, she doesn't want anyone else down there.
Okay.
It does not explain. She will, in the middle of the night, start hissing.
Okay.
I know everyone's asleep. I know where the animals sleep. There's no one down there. And it's at that point you really, really kind of think, what are you actually doing?
Yeah.
Because there's no active threat, but I know this is the exact stance you take when there's someone coming down the stairs or they are actively in the basement. And it's different than her posture for like when other cats try and come downstairs and whatnot. This is I am guarding you from an active adult stance. I mean, she has her hair raised and like really hissing. And at that one specifically, it was to the point where I'm like, if I don't, go actively stop her, something's going to be attacked by her. And like, I don't want that to happen to, for example, if my nephew or something's coming down the stairs, wanting to know where Uncle John is, I don't want my cat attacking him. I better go see what's up. And I go out there and there's nothing. Just nothing.
Yeah, we have 2 cats, and if there's a hiss in our house, it only means 2 things. Our male Greeble is being too playful and too, overstimulating for our female cat, and she hisses at him. Every once in a while, it's only happened like a couple times after they've gotten used to each other. Or something's wrong, and that hasn't happened yet, but I've had weird occurrences in the house. I don't think our house is haunted or anything. I think it's just weird mind games with like the neighbors upstairs making noise or something. But do you think there's something in your house?
How did my cousin put it? My house is protected by the goodwill of our ancestors.
Okay.
Now keep in mind my dad built the house, so do with that as you will.
Do you think there's stuff outside? Yeah. Let's say I want to go camping in the middle of winter. I'm going to drive down the highway 30, 40 minutes after I see gibbon. And then I'm going to take a left and I'm going to go find some spot in the wilderness that I have pre-planned and made sure nobody owns that land. I have a heater. I'm not going to be, I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm not going to be taken by hypothermia. I have enough cold weather gear. Let's say I'm prepared for every eventuality up to like a coyote trying to come into my tent.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would tell you is watch out for coyotes.
Yeah. So let's say I'm prepared for everything like that. Would you warn anybody about anything outside when it comes to something you can shoot but probably can't stop?
I would probably, aside from coyotes and, the occasional bobcat.
Yeah.
Aside from those, generally I don't think people have to worry too much. Now, let's say you go out and there's a random grave marker and you decide this is the perfect spot to put a tent and whatnot. I would advise against it. Mostly because if you find a random grave marker out on the side of a road or something, that means that is the site of where someone has actively died. There are several actually on the way to my house of places where people have definitely been hit by a car and they have died there.
Just walking or...
Just walking, driving, being, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
A lot of them, you will see, they are made out of pieces of wood, and someone has carved the name on it. Those, the older they are, I would advise avoiding those specifically.
Do you think there's like a danger in that, or is it just like out of respect?
It is more out of a respect. It's the same as, take your shoes off when you enter the Holy Lands.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Much like, for example, occasionally I help out with the graveyards, be it like, cleaning, putting up flags, etc. and whatnot.
You talking about in town?
So there is a little graveyard out north, where actually a lot of my family is buried. And it's, that nice little country community graveyard. There's, maybe 100 graves or so, give or take. That specifically, we do not go there during the evening or, at night. A, out of respect for this is a graveyard, you shouldn't be here at night. That's just foolish. B, we have a lot invested in that graveyard.
Yeah.
As a final resting place for a lot of the kinfolk around.
Mm-hmm.
In general, you pay your respects and then you will leave. There was one time we actually had problems with people breaking in the graveyard. Doing the wonderful teenage stuff of, oh, we're in a graveyard at night.
Yeah.
See what's up. Don't do that.
So that's like outside of town.
Yep, that it is.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think the only graveyard I know about in town is that one by that, I think it's a middle school.
Yep, the one down, oh gosh, what? I'm blanking on that road name for some reason. It's right by Sunrise, I think is the one you're looking
Sunrise, yeah. Yeah.
Yep, and that one's actually a very nice graveyard. I do really like that. For some people who don't know, I make yearly rounds to all the graves. People have, let's say any of my friends buried there, our family members buried there, a lot of things like that. We do make our yearly rounds on such times. In general, though, have I ever had a weird experience in a graveyard? I have not. Do I have a healthy respect for graveyards? Yes.
I feel like those correlate. I feel like because you're very respectful and you have that mindset of you go in, you pay your respects, and you leave. You don't linger. I feel like that's the reason why. I don't remember who I was talking to about this earlier. They were like, "Oh, I don't really have very many paranormal experiences." But it was like, but also you're very
maybe not cautious, but aware.
You're very aware. You're very. But the person I was talking to was like a very large stature. Like they held themselves up at a certain kind of way, and I felt like most ghosts, unless they were truly evil or benevolent, wouldn't really mess with that. Like they're out to mess with the people that are disrespectful and are out there to look to provoke something kind of feeling.
Yeah. Now, along those lines, there are experiences my cousins have had, which are, they put it as a more playful haunting.
And I love that stuff. I could live in a house with a playful haunting.
They view it as the spirit, ghost, specter, however you would assume would be there, is more reminding them that, hey, I'm still here, I'm still aware of you.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be cool.
Yeah.
Type thing.
For me, it's that, enjoy the moment you have now because now is the envy of all the dead.
That's a good way to put that. I like that.
Yeah. That's a quote from a movie that I very much enjoy. But, yeah, I would love to live in a house with, like, a low-level, playful haunting just to remind me that it's there, but also, like, you leave your mark. Whatever your spirit is, whatever your yearning is, whatever your wrathful festering is, it stays in the world after you leave, but also you leave.
Do you know the difference between a spirit and a wraith?
For me, it's either something I don't know what it is, and I'm trying to figure out what it is, or I'm in that headspace of a D&D campaign, and I'm trying to classify it
Gotcha.
as this object or plot device to be overcome. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, in real life, I'm not going to put any labels on that unless it gives me a label or aligns so much with some preconceptual thing that has a label that I'm going to associate it with that. Because I really don't think along those lines. But go ahead and give me your conversation
So a
on
good
that.
way to kind of conceptualize it, let's go back to the playful hauntings and whatnot. One would assume that would be more of along the lines of a specter, which is, in a very broad sense, something that has yet to finish a task. Be it like let it.
It lingers.
It lingers until its task is fulfilled, and then
There's something keeping it around.
yeah. Versus a wraith, which is a more vengeful spirit. It is there to cause harm.
It's there out of spite.
It's there out of spite. Spite and malice is a good way to put it.
Yeah. That's
Um,
interesting.
Now, would I recommend going and actively inviting a specter into your life? No. I highly recommend on a more religious, I guess, feeling and terminology for all of that. Do not mess with the abyss, the aether, or the ether.
I'm very much of the mind of we're at this place in society where not much is a mystery, and what is, you really can't have any hands-on experience with it. You know what I mean? Like the two biggest abysses right now that are most evident are the ocean and space. And the first thing is do you have enough money to go down there or up there? Whereas right now, for about $15, I could buy some candles and some incense and write some on the ground and see if it works.
That is true. Diving into the concept of the Ouija boards, America's favorite pastime hobby, especially during Halloween.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of history of that in like Louisiana before America.
Yep. Are you familiar with what a white witch is?
A what?
A white witch.
A white witch.
It's a concept that was thrown around during my childhood.
This sounds like a Billy Idol album.
It kind of does. One of the people I know mentioned how his mother-in-law, she essentially became a white witch. So she used a lot of witchcraft in her religious practices and whatnot.
From what I already know and from context clues, I'm going to go ahead and make a guess that it's someone who does what could loosely be called witchcraft when it comes to like Wiccan, just being in nature.
Along those lines.
Using nature to
more or
kind
less.
of get your own means of involving yourself in with the flow of energy and nature and reality.
Yep. So now, keep in mind, White Witch is probably a very outdated name. This gentleman at the time was 30, and keep in mind that was back when I was a child. So he probably picked it up like maybe 70s somewhere around. Math is terrible for me, but you all understand the concept at least. He had explained how one day he and his brother and his friends were, doing the cool hip thing at the time, and they were, playing with the Ouija board and whatnot.
Oh boy.
Who the gentleman's mother had said specifically, do not mess with this.
Don't.
And, them being teenagers, it's like,
Just makes you
whatever,
want to do
Ma.
it more, yeah.
Yeah, it just makes you want to do it more. So they're called for food and whatnot, and they put because they're not supposed to be doing it, they put the Ouija board away, and they go eat dinner, and during that time, his mother had walked into the other room, and she asked, "Hey, I thought I told you guys not to play with the Ouija board." And so they all look at each other because they all know they put that thing away. But they walk in the room and it's just lying on the table.
But they didn't say goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I have no context clues, but one would assume things are weird sometimes, and we have no explanations.
Yep. I had a family that lived close to me before I moved. They had told me that long ago they had an experience with a Ouija board. Just like you said, they had some friends over. They were drinking a little bit. They were partying and pulled out the Ouija board, played with it a little bit, put it away, and then all went to bed. Friends went back home to their own houses. And then they woke up, and out in the middle of the living room, it was back where they were playing with it. And so they were like, haha, yeah, I ain't messing with that. We're done partying. We're done playing with it. So they throw it away. They had it in the box.
As one does.
Yeah.
You watch that thing go.
Yeah, they waited for the trash truck to come. Waited for him to turn the corner onto the street, put it in the trash can, closed the lid, and then watched it take it away. And then, I think about a week later, they said, came back, sitting on the counter, in the box. And they were like, nah, dude. And then they burned it. And then after that, they had a little bit more trouble. And then I think they moved or something. And they moved to where we met them. And they were like, yeah, that's why we don't do that anymore. We don't even let that shit in our house. And I was like, cool. I will take this back home. And that's the one that I brought up to Nebraska and is in Mark Schaefer's house. Because Tasia won't allow it in our household for good reason.
Good man.
But I definitely am of that mindset of... And the excuse for me is we're in such an age of technology that, not enough to where we can go out in space and explore that, but so much to where basically every plot of land has been somewhat remotely discovered or surveillanced, but there's still mysteries out there. And there's still things either in old buildings where no one lives anymore or in the crevices of the people's minds who go there. There's shit that needs to be discovered still. And I'm of the school of thought that we just need to put more people in those situations for us to find out. And as your average white person in a horror movie, I'm willing to be one of those people to go into one of those situations.
Oh man, that means I'd be the second one and I'm a goner.
We've always made the joke that Tasia's going to be in the van watching the laptop.
Watching the laptop with the live video feed.
Yeah. And I'll be, in the hallway underneath the second basement. So John Noller, as a local Nebraskan, let me know if you know any places or stories or hear anything like that. I do want to get into... What was the name of that house? The Frank house?
The Frank house.
Yeah.
Wonderful historic site. Beautiful, beautiful area.
Tasia was doing a class there, and I was just walking around campus, and I found myself there. And there's
it draws you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Okay. There's a gazebo right outside that I hung. I think there's 2 gazebos on like opposite sides of the building. There's like a smaller one and a bigger one. Isn't there?
There might be. I might have to go...
'Cause
again, most of my memories are from inside
It's got that
the house.
old white colonizer porch that wraps around the house.
It's quite beautiful. One of my favorite things
Gorgeous house.
about that is there was a stained glass window in there that when the time it was built, they actually brought that in, the stained glass, and at the time, very expensive. And it is kind of stood the test by the time. It's so amazing, so pretty. I love that place.
See, you bring up stained glass, and we're talking about creepy places in Nebraska. That graveyard that we were talking about earlier by that middle school,
Yeah.
it has a few mausoleums in it that have stained glass.
You ever cracked open a mausoleum?
No.
Okay. Good to know. I would not recommend it unless you're ready for what's inside.
Oh, I'm ready.
It's a whole lot of nothing.
Is there like a specific smell? Is there any like air ventilation?
If it's sealed, not really. Now that said, a lot of them will have a small little airflow,
Okay.
give or take. You know,
I was about to say, is that
enough
commonplace?
to make it sure. Modern ones, I believe, are pretty good about some ventilation at least.
Because that air will go
But properly
stale.
sealed and whatnot is also pretty good.
Because there's a few old ones out there that were just built like that.
Yep, there are a few old ones out there that they're just you seal it and that's it.
Yeah, that is nuts.
Um,
Do those sealed ones, do they have doors? Or are they like...
Some of them do. Some of the designs do allow for, a door in case. For example, there was a hailstorm one time, and one of the graveyard councils out in the one we help with called up my father, and he was like, "Hey, I need to know if the one of the small little mausoleum tomb type things was vandalized or was it hail damage." And my dad's like, "All right, well, let's go take a look, I suppose."
And you have to crack that thing open and take a look.
I remember my dad coming down and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna go crack open a mausoleum to look to see if it's vandalism or not." And being a teenager, you're like, "Oh yeah, man, let's
I'm
do
about
this."
that, yeah. That is nuts.
So
You're probably one of the very few people in this town, like 0.5% of people in this town that have been witness to something like that.
Now, this particular one was it was a family burial type one.
Aren't they mostly like that?
Yep, most of them are like that. But this one in particular, made out of stone and cement, whatnot. This one in particular did have a small glass window on the outside, letting light in, kind of producing a very cool stained glass effect.
Yeah.
Because you get the resonance of the light inside and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it did also have a actual pretty sturdy. I forget what type of material the door was made out of. I think it was relatively solid, but you could open it. Like it was to allow people to go in and do minor maintenance things on it and whatnot. But it turns out it was hail damage. No one had vandalized it, which was a huge relief for our community at the time out there.
Yeah.
Mostly because if it's vandalism, we're gonna have to find out who has done this.
Yeah.
Because we know the people buried here.
Yeah. That's crazy. We were going around the graveyard and looking at those mausoleums, and I think it was someone walking around the graveyard as we were, came up to us and started talking to us about how there's a specific type of stained glass technique that's local to Kearney, Nebraska. Like it came out of Kearney, Nebraska, and that's what most of the mausoleums that have stained glass.
I wonder if the Historical Society would know anything about that one.
I'm pretty sure because the guy kind of made it seem like a big deal, and
I mean, it would be. It definitely.
Yeah. And apparently, UNK is like keeping track and like teaching people, making sure it still lives on.
Huh.
That same
That is super
technique.
cool.
Yeah.
I love to see the old traditions stay alive in that
Oh,
aspect. Especially if it's used on important memorials.
Oh yeah. But yeah, we were just walking around looking at the mausoleums and just peering in through the windows and going, man, what an idea to just keep your dead in a sterile room that stays the same for generations, and you just add a couple bodies. Nuts. And this guy started talking to us about something local that is like a technique that people learn and can teach through local future generations. And yeah, that was just a big crazy rabbit hole that we just kind of found ourselves able to go down.
It's always the random strangers who will have the weirdest facts for you.
Oh yeah. Have you met or have you had any experience with seeing UFOs around, or like met any people that have like told you, oh, I'm sure if you go around at this time of night?
So, since I live in the country, now, keep in mind, I live in the pathway of the Kearney Airport's landing strip. So, we see planes
Their headlights.
daily, pretty
Yeah.
much. And even at night, you can see them, flying over and whatnot. Stargazing, we used to do a lot of stargazing when I was really young. My dad and I were out just lying on a blanket one summer night and, looking up at the stars and whatnot. And he and I look at three, what we assume are stars, kind of in a triangle shape. And we're like, that's kind of a weird shaped plane to have lights in a triangle, and, none of them are green or red. Like, is it we're trying to figure out, if it's a, like, more civilian type plane, like, what's going on with this? Is it like a, one of the fumigator planes that's, was out late and is now heading back or something to that effect? But then we noticed it spinning, like, keeping in a triangle, and just it spun almost 360 degrees, and we're both just lying there like, I don't have an explanation for that, because nothing we're aware of at this time moves like that and still keeps going straight, and nothing is like catching on fire and falling down. So that is one of the very few times I have something in the sky that I cannot explain. Now, we do occasionally get like meteor showers, stuff like that, which are really cool, because, it's a meteor shower. Everyone loves them.
So yeah, the reason why I ask is because I spent a little bit of time in Illinois, and I've heard some stuff from the locals about how if you're paying attention to your life and you're going about your daily business, you probably won't see it. But if you look up and you look up to expect to see something, and you keep doing it, eventually you'll see something. And this was 2 states over. This was along the what's the river that's on the other side of Iowa? Mississippi. Yeah. This was like right on the Mississippi in Illinois. We had to go into Burlington, Iowa to like go into town.
What do you know of Bigfoot?
I've heard a lot of things. I've heard a lot of hypotheses about a lost species, or I guess it's like the main.
Yeah, the general stuff. I'm
Yeah.
assuming. Do you
haven't
know that
gotten
there
to
have
it.
been Bigfoot sightings in Nebraska?
But yeah, I've never heard Nebraska. Yeah, I don't know.
In high school, I had to write a paper, and for some reason I was assigned Bigfoot sightings in Nebraska. And I think at the time, if I recall, it's something like there were 20-some sightings of Bigfoot in Nebraska. And digging further into that, a lot of the sightings were from not like your local people. They were from like actual Bigfoot hunters. So the conclusion of that is, if you're looking for something, you're probably going to find it one way or another.
Yeah.
Now, with that, there were some sightings that were also local. This has been your random fun fact about Nebraska. It's also illegal to hunt whales here.
That just makes me want to buy a harpoon.
I wouldn't, man. It's illegal. Only takes one guy to ruin it for the rest of us, I'll tell you that.
One man tried to kill a whale in Nebraska?
Just don't go whaling in Nebraska.
Did he buy a bow? and outfit it for whaling? Like, I need to know the story.
Ah,
Did he take it down the highway?
we might have to do a podcast on random Nebraska laws sometimes because there's some fun ones out there.
I've heard of some random laws, but now I need to look into Nebraska specifically because you can't whale.
Correct.
It's illegal.
It is illegal to whale in Nebraska.
So if I rented a van and filled it with harpoons,
Are you whaling?
I might have the intention to whale,
It might be plausible crime there.
but there's no whales, so there's no possibility for
And this is
quote
where the
unquote
mystery begins.
whaling to happen. Because in order to be a whaler and to participate in the act of whaling, there has to be whales. And if there's not,
I'm gonna let you search for that whale.
technically I'm not whaling if I never find one. But I can search for the rest of my days legally. Because I'm not whaling, there's no whales.
Good luck, Ahab.
I'm taking this to the federal court, dude. Me and the state of Nebraska
Awesome.
are about to go head and head, dude.
I'll support you up until about county level, and then that's on you from there, man.
I really want to know the story behind that. Wow. That's nuts.
Another fun fact is Nebraska has a lot of rivers that people don't actually think about.
Because it's making me think of the sharks that swim up through the,
Bull sharks.
yeah, the bull sharks that are swimming up through the Gulf and coming up, like, through the rivers.
As far as I'm immediately aware, I do not believe there has been a shark, like, in a Nebraska river that isn't, like, one of the major
A fresh
ones
water.
flowing out.
Yeah, yeah.
Now keep in mind the Platte's like waist high some areas, so
But whaling, I'm not going to be able to get over that.
sleep well tonight, my friend.
Nebraska, I don't think you would call it necessarily a military state. There's a lot of citizens that back the military.
Oh, my friend,
But,
Nebraska is a military state.
It is, okay. There's a lot of bases out here and
Do you
stuff?
know SAC Air?
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, we got the museum here for a reason.
Okay.
All the missile silos.
Oh,
In Nebraska as well?
yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
We were a production hub for, I think it was World War II, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Like a lot of things were produced in Nebraska, and a lot of again the missile silos in Nebraska as well.
Mhm.
For example, there are some people out there who have purchased the old abandoned ones.
That's gotta be fun.
I don't know if you know or not, but there was a YouTuber who lives in Nebraska who purchased one of those, and he was fixing
feel
it up.
like I've heard about this. For use?
I mean, for personal use, like he was
Okay.
turning it into like a house.
A
type
living,
of thing.
yeah.
Now, that said, there are a lot of really cool museums in Nebraska, like the Sac Air Museum.
Mhm.
One of my favorite places to go is the Air and Space Museum. Mostly because, so on my father's side, my grandpa was in the Air Force. And I have vivid memories of my dad telling me, at the actual museum, we're looking at one of the bombers they used, I think it was the B-52s,
Yeah.
the Flying Fortress.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, your grandpa flew on one of those. So I have a wonderful picture somewhere, I need to really actually find that, of my dad overlooking the upper walkway, looking over the B-52. And it's just a really cool... This is a guy remembering his dad.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's nuts. I love all that world political history and all that stuff. So
Have you been to I believe it's the Hastings Museum?
I've been to 2 museums in Nebraska, and they were both in Omaha.
Gotcha.
One was a art museum, and the other one was a train museum at the...
I love trains.
I was working at the Amtrak location, and the train museum was on the other side of the long train yard of tracks.
Gotcha.
And that was the old train station, and this was the new train station. Have you heard any anonymous woo-woo secret organization, FBI, puppet master, like secret technology?
I mean, from like just kind of being around, not really. Now, do you have your crazy conspiracy theorist?
Mm-hmm.
I have never heard a random, like, there's a puppet control master anywhere in Nebraska or something like that, or, secret military bases in Nebraska. Now, are there? I mean, there are bases all over the world, so would I question if one's like, oh, there's actually one here? No, I'm not going to question it. That's probably just normal at this point. Now, some of the random museums around the state you will get little tidbits of information from past wars and whatnot that really kind of shine a light on the importance of Nebraska and around it. For example, it's like the North American Defense, SAC, all of that, the missile programs and whatnot. That's a lot of Nebraska, because we are the midpoint in the U.S. So it's
middle radius.
us, South Dakota, North Dakota, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, I've had a couple conversations with a few people that are like, oh, I'm in the military, I was in the Air Force, and they're working on some crazy stuff in there, hint, hint, wink, wink, and like didn't tell me anything else. I was just like, oh, okay.
I mean, of course they are. It's an arms race.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
We have weapons that utilize sound.
Yeah, and light.
We have laser pointers that'll say, hey, this is where it's gonna hit. Good luck. And, I'm always very surprised of the people like, oh, this technology didn't exist several years ago. I'm like, yeah, because it was in development. Like,
They're still trying to figure out if it would work. They had it.
they definitely wouldn't let us know they had it, but they were definitely working on a better version of it.
Yeah.
It's like when they redid the nuclear programs and all of that, and switched out everything. Are you going to tell the public that? Nah, maybe a couple of years later we might. And now it's like common knowledge.
Because if you tell people while you're doing it, it's like, hey, this many, warheads out of the total are decommissioned right now and have not been replaced, and we are at this percentage of our maximum occupancy of retaliation.
It's like some random thoughts that keep me up at night is the fact that we have missing nuclear weapons in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely, the broken arrow.
Yeah, they're just they're there somewhere.
What?
Am I suspicious that they're randomly going to go off someday? No, I'm not. I'm really not worried. Will it, maybe leak some radiation occasionally? I mean, what really doesn't in this age?
Yeah.
That worry was for a different time, is my personal thought on that one.
But yeah, I think I don't remember what state. I don't know if I'll be able to remember, but someone found like something in their backyard digging for like a garden or something, and he called his local guy, and they were like, yeah, this is a warhead. And I think they found one like 3 miles away in like the same town.
Hey, sometimes it be like that. Sometimes you strike gold, other times it's a missile. Oh man, so kind of tying that all back down here, do you know why they call downtown the Bricks?
Because the main kind of downtown area's road is made out of bricks?
Yep. Do you know the story behind that?
I know there used to be a tram system.
That's true. Keep in mind, this is what the elders tell me, and they probably do know best. A lot of people when I was growing up told me that a lot of prisoners of war would help with that particular spot, which is always a random thought to me whenever I'm, downtown walking about. I'm like, man.
American prisoners of war, or like people that came back?
They just told me prisoners of war, generally. Now, was that them keeping, the innocence of a child growing up at the time? Perhaps, perhaps not.
That's interesting.
What I do know is, man, World War II was quite a time for just the town in general.
Because America did have domestic prisoners during World War II because of World War II. Like, we had prisoners of war.
So it might have been them. We're going to have to ask the Historical Society on that.
Yeah.
Man, I have a lot of calls to make tomorrow.
The Bricks is fun.
I do enjoy a lot of downtown.
We're on the Bricks.
That we are.
Since we're on the topic of horror stories and stuff, do you know or have you heard of any buildings besides the Frank House that are kind of like, don't go there at night?
Old Kearney High.
Old Kearney High.
Old Kearney High. You would know it as a church now.
Okay, so it's not the one I was on top of. The first job I got in Kearney was Kearney High School.
Gotcha. I don't think it was the one you would have worked for.
Okay.
This one is over. Do you know where Runza is?
Yeah.
Down on 39th.
Yeah.
You know that big church over there?
Yeah, they got the football field right next to the
Yep.
road right there. Yeah.
Yep. That was the old Kearney High.
Okay.
Now, specifically, a lot of the thespians out there would have told you that the theater in there was haunted. Do I believe it? Not necessarily.
Theater kids.
They're theater kids. I mean, I love all the thespians and theater kids I grew up with and whatnot, but sometimes you guys were out there a bit.
They are known to over dramatize.
Yep. Now, that said, were there experiences my friends told me that I cannot logically explain using the knowledge I have now or then? Yes. Random doors closing? Yes. I don't have an actual explanation for that, because I have been all over the old theater back there, and there's no major drafts. There's, the hinges are well taken care of. We go back to my dad was a weatherization inspector. This is the stuff I always think about. Yeah, I got no explanation. Door just closed.
Interesting.
Good luck, kids.
Why is it always schools and churches? And specifically in Nebraska, schools and churches are very...
A lot of the schools in Nebraska, especially like Kearney, they are very old.
Mhm.
I mean, some of these were built like 70s. I say old as though it wasn't like 50 years ago. Yeah, I mean, just throughout the ages being from like the 60s on, give or take. I mean, you have your random tragedies that might have happened in different areas. All of that, one could assume, would help the occult versions of any hauntings, etc.
But schools and churches here in Nebraska specifically, I feel, seem to be very... Like, the schools have always either been associated with a church or used to be a church and was expanded on, or it used to be a school and now it's a church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of some of that goes along with the we're approaching, the modern, we need to modernize era is what I'm personally thinking about it. It's like for years, students and teachers, parents were saying, "Hey, we need a new school building. When can we get one?" And it took a decade or so, because with respect, the old building wasn't doing too great. I know because I was in math class and was cold in winter. We know the heater's on. But man, you could definitely see a crack to the outside through the wall. I mean, it was around a door, but still, come on.
I forget where it is, but there's an old schoolhouse that is now a thrift shop or something that has that very eerie, creepy, something's still here vibe.
You're going to get that a lot in a lot of, the churches and buildings. Now, psychologically, when you go about it like that, let's say, for example, your churches. You associate that normally as a holy place and whatnot. At night, when the lights aren't on, your psyche kind of takes over, and
It's
what
this
if
inverse.
something else is here?
It's
the
not
inverse.
this place of respite.
It's not been.
It's this.
It's not lit up. It's not in the light.
Yeah.
Clearly, something dark is here.
Yeah.
Now, to counteract that, we have, I guess, in my childhood, we were taught that even if the church is dark, it is still considered a holy ground.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of places that
From
one
the,
could
from the
consider.
Christian point of view, this is a holy place.
Yeah.
No matter what time, no matter
should-
what horrors are
you should
going
have
on,
no fear.
you should be able to
treading in
go
the
into the
house.
church and be able to be at peace, and be able to be heard and witnessed by
And kind of taking a note off of that, let's say you're out and about and you come across, let's say, an old, like, built in, the 1800s type building-esque feel. The same kind of concept applies. In the day, oh man, this is a cool place, much like the Frank House. It's a cool place. What a neat historical site.
Yeah.
At night, it becomes different. Everything is flipped. In psychological, this is no longer a safe place. I'm unfamiliar with it. There are
I want
no
to
lights
take
on.
these cameras into the Frank house at night.
Buckle up, kid. Get approval for that.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. I that's why
I guarantee you, I got 2 people who'd be down.
Okay. Yeah, definitely let me know, and if you know anybody who still has the authority to give an okay on that, let us know. If not, we'll talk to some people.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that. But going back to the psychological fear of the unknown, essentially, at that
Yeah.
point. I actually helped a couple. For those who don't know, I function as a discount priest. Do I recommend my services? That's up to you. It don't matter to me much. But they were terrified of entering just old buildings and like itself. Mostly because they were just terrified of what might be in there. We don't know what could be in there, be it a entity or anything else. And I had to remind them that these places, built a century or so ago, the people who originally owned this, they're no longer around.
Yeah.
Now that said, if you do see something in there, it's most likely them trying to, check on the place, make sure everything's all right. One would associate it as a fragment of the person itself being attached to that specific area. And that's like, let's say a grave is dug up and a house is built on top of it because that's what the city decides, and that place becomes haunted. Well, that's the spot where that person knows this is where it's supposed to be. At that point, who technically lives there?
Yeah.
Legally, it's whoever, built the house there and is now dwelling. Spiritually, it's whoever's been tied to it the longest. At least in my eyes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Oh yeah, the Buffalo County Historical Society, and the one in Kearney and whatnot. They're a great group. I've worked with them. Well, worked is a very loose term. I inquired about some of the history of Kearney, probably in my high school years, out of a recommendation. They were a blast to work with. They're very, very into their job, and if I recall, I think some of them are actually volunteers.
That's good to hear.
Their entire thing is they want to keep, the history alive of what's happened and whatnot.